Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and today's video is going to be a 2-for-1 in regards to topics that we're going to be going over. Starting off with a comparison between the Fender American Vintage 65 Jazzmaster and the Fender Japan Traditional 60s Special Run that has some similar specifications to this guitar and is kind of going after the same vibe. We're going to be doing that via sound comparisons, as well as afterwards I'm going to be doing my best to convey the things that are difficult to understand the differences between in a YouTube video, and that goes as far as the build quality and most importantly how they feel back to back. And after the comparison, I'm going to segue into the second topic of today's video, which is going to be having multiples of the same guitar. Is it really necessary to do that? Some pros, some cons, and ultimately I'm going to finish with a decision on whether or not this guitar is going to be sticking around for the long haul, because I really am consolidating and downsizing my collection. To begin with though, let's get into the sound samples. We use the Victory V40 Deluxe combo. We use the reverb that's built into the amplifier via the reverb tank, and then for our driven sounds, the tried and true Benson preamp, mic'd up with the SM57 right into the Universal Audio Apollo interface. Let's get to it. Now, after I finished the sound comparison for these two guitars, I did something I don't frequently do when I'm producing these videos. I ran over to the computer and went to Pro Tools and listened on the studio monitors to see if what I was hearing in the room was translating the same way onto the recording, and for the most part, yeah, it really was. These guitars sound very, very different to one another, and the biggest thing that separates them in that sense has to be the electronics. This guitar doesn't really sound like a Jazzmaster to me in a few ways. This is so much more high-end to it, and a lot of people think that the Jazzmaster is a pretty twangy high-end instrument. I mean, it's got a 1 meg pot to kind of offset some of that, but it's a stark difference between the two of them. I'm not saying one is better or one is worse, but this guitar, sound-wise, to my ears, sounds more like a mix between a Jazzmaster, a Tele, and a Strat, versus that guitar, that just sounds like a Jazzmaster, or how I perceive a Jazzmaster to sound. But it is worth noting, I used the same exact settings when it came to the amplifier for the demonstration for today. If I wanted to boost a little bit of the treble, take out the high end, I could have done that on the amplifier to kind of fit this guitar a little bit more. And then conversely, I could have boosted some of the high end if I wanted to get a little more out of it from the Goldie. But that is what it is when it comes to these demos. I just feel like it's something that needs to be acknowledged more often. As far as the feel goes, this does have a 7¼ inch radius, and I really do prefer that when it comes to Jazzmaster style guitars, but it does have medium jumbo frets on it. You would think the way I just said that I'm gonna say I really don't like the medium jumbo frets. You'd be wrong. I do like the medium jumbo frets. Having been playing a lot of the Momose, that guitar has big old frets on it, quite frankly, and I've grown to really like it. This guitar feels really nice. It feels at home. It feels like a nice compromise guitar. If you want something that looks the part and has a little bit of the flair, really the only thing that screams vintage Jazzmaster to this guitar, as far as outside of the aesthetic, is the actual 7¼ inch radius. As far as the actual feel, playing them back to back, this feels like a modern-ish version, whereas that feels like a straight up vintage reissue. There's just no frills about it. And whether or not you're gonna like one over the other for that, that's gonna be all up to you and your own tastes. The neck shape itself and the finish on the neck, this doesn't have a very thick finish on the neck, and I really like that. I cannot stand when guitars get shipped out with a lot of coats of polyester or nitro on the back of the guitar. So in that sense, really good. It's a little bit beefy, but I find that the neck on the American Vintage reissue, the gold one, it fattens up a little bit more in a way that I prefer. And the only other guitar that I can think of from Fender Japan that also does that is the Takashi Kato Stratocaster. God, I love that guitar. So let me know in the comments down below, did you have the same kind of takeaway from the sound comparison as far as the disparity of the sounds, or was it just all blown up in my own head? And also, which guitar you preferred? If I had to pick a winner between the two of them, there's only ever gonna be one, and it's this guy. Nothing against this one, but this one just pulls at my heartstrings, which leads me to topic number 2. Having multiple guitars, some pros, some cons, and ultimately making a decision on whether or not I'm going to be keeping or selling this one in the great sell-off of 2023. Some definite pros involved with it. Obviously, from the sound example, you can have two totally different sounding guitars that are the same exact model, and pickups can really make a big difference in that. You can also try different experimentations with hardware that can affect the tone as well. It's nice having multiple of the same thing. It leaves you a little bit of room to experiment. But outside of that, another big pro, and this also really applies to me specifically, if you have a guitar that is really dear to you, there are places I would never think of bringing this out to gig or to play in general, because I cannot risk having this guitar ever be stolen from me. There's not many guitars I feel that way about. This is one of them. So having a guitar that does sound similar enough, and it feels really the same to it and captures the same kind of tones and vibe that I'm going for, it's definitely a positive. Some cons. Now, the first con I can think of is very obvious, but it might not be a con to you depending on your financial situation. You got to shell out the money to buy a second guitar. In this market, that's not exactly cheap, and prices keep going this way, not this way. So it might not be something that's financially responsible or the best thing to do as far as an investment goes. The second thing that I think really should be considered, and this goes beyond just buying one of the same guitar model, but it also applies. Really think about how much playtime you're going to be giving to that second guitar, whether you already have it and you're considering selling it like I am right now, or if you're somebody who's on the fence about buying another guitar, whether it is the same kind of model that you already have, you just want a second one for, or you're just buying another guitar just to buy another guitar. How much are you going to be playing it? Do you have a specific actual use for it? Not something you're planning to do, something you're actively doing or working on. These are decisions that only you can answer, but be honest with yourself, because the last thing you want to do is spend $1,000, $2,000 on an instrument only to have it sit in its case and rot away and think to yourself, I really shouldn't have bought that guitar. I didn't really need it, unless you're really lucky and somehow that guitar flew up in value. But those things appear to be few and far in between these days. On to the decision that I said I was going to get to. I am going to be selling this guitar. It's nothing against this guitar, but I don't want to gig with Jazzmasters anymore. I prefer Jaguars, and also I prefer playing with semi-hollow body guitars for a multitude of different reasons, which we'll get into when we go more over those guitars, because we still have some more comparisons between Gibson and 77 that I'd like to go over. So let me know in the comments down below if you found this helpful, useful, or entertaining. I do appreciate every single one of you guys that clicks on these videos. I'm trying my best to make things a little bit more interesting and a little bit more, that's something to think about when you're doing these kinds of videos, other than just this is guitar A, this is guitar B, they sound so different, they sound so the same. It all gets a little bit boring at that point, so it's nice to mix things up. Don't forget, play your favorite guitar today, or play your secondary guitar, whatever's going to make you happy. But as long as you're playing your instrument, that's what it's all about. And I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy, everybody.